Morning Bumblebee folks, I'm Alexa, resident emo girly, and while I'm usually thrilled to spend time over here, today's topic of discussing is unsettling at best, if not overall disturbing and nightmare worthy. Question for you all, what's one thing that will always disgust you? Mine is cleaning out the drain, so let me know yours in the comments. And welcome to the top 10 scariest prisons around the world that will disgust you. Number 10, Guantanamo Bay. I figured it would make sense to kick off today with the most infamous prison on our list. If I had $1 for every time I've made a reference to punishment being worse or equivalent to something at, Gitmo, I'd be able to afford a home in Toronto by now. Back in April of 2011, WikiLeaks, along with the New York Times, NPR, and The Guardian, and other independent news organizations, began publishing 779 formerly secret documents relating to detainees. This event was referred to as the Guantanamo Bay Files Leak, or the Guantanamo Files, or Gitmo Files for short. I like my short forms. The documents consist of classified assessments, interviews, and internal memos about detainees, which were written in the Pentagon's Joint Task Force, Guantanamo, headquartered at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base. The documents are marked secret and no foreign, which is information that is not to be shared with representatives of other countries. So what were the, deep dark secrets? What's going to disgust us? Oh, no biggie, just more than 150 innocent Afghanistan and Pakistani folks, including farmers, chefs, and drivers, were held for years without charges. The documents also reveal that some of the prison's youngest and oldest detainees, who include an 89-year-old man and a teen, suffered from fragile mental and physical conditions. So what happens there? Well, legally speaking, we don't know a heck of a lot. But let's cover what we do know. Folks in charge at Gitmo are allowed to use what are officially called enhanced interrogation techniques, which is systematic punishment of detainees in a way most of us would consider unethical. The techniques include forced nudity, painful stress positions, sleep deprivation, hypothermia, and until 2003, waterboarding, which I'm pretty sure they still use unofficially. Yeah, no thanks. Moving on. Number 9, Diyarbakir Prison. It's located in the town of the same name in southeastern Turkey and was established in 1980 as an E-type prison by the Ministry of Justice. After the September 12, 1980 Turkish coup d'etat, the facility was transferred to military administration and became a martial law military prison, which, if that sounds bad, it is. The period of barbarity nickname given to the establishment refers to this time period where prisoners were exposed to horrific acts of systemic torment. Between 1981 and 1984, at least 34 prisoners lost their lives. Words like disco and theater were used by guards as substitutes for grim acts of hell, such as administering physical punishment and stripping inmates naked. Among the most common practices were severe and systematic physical torment, pulling of hair, being blindfolded and hosed, solitary confinement, guards insults, constant and relentless surveillance and intimidation, death threats, sleep, sensory, water, and food deprivation for extensive periods, tormenting the soles of feet, stress positions, similar to Gitmo, excessive exercise and extreme temperatures, stretching, squeezing, or crushing of limbs and genitals, piling of naked prisoners on top of each other, asphyxia and mock execution, electric shocks, and specifically electrodes attached to genitals, burning with cigarettes, extraction of nails and healthy teeth, sexual humiliation and harm, rectal examinations, forcing prisoners to urinate on each other, and more. It is claimed guard captain's dog, a German shepherd, was trained to bite the genitals of inmates after they were stripped. More awful reports say that some inmates were forced to sexually harm each other, while there were also threats of sexual violence against family members. Allegedly, when a new prisoner arrived at the prison, that guard captain would meet him at the entrance and then turn to a guard and say, "Prepare him a bath," then take him to the dormitory. Now, this isn't any regular kind of bath or transportation, so skip ahead if you're a little squeamish. Almost 20 guards would accompany the prisoner to a welcoming thrashing, and then he was dragged unconscious to the bath, which was a bathtub of human feces where they would leave him for a few hours. Number 8, Rikers Island. Okay, hands up. Who else mostly knows about this prison because of watching way too many episodes of Law & Order growing up? Rikers, aka New York City's main jail complex and the island it sits on, is situated on the East River between Queens and the Bronx. As one of the largest correctional institutions in the world, the facility is made up of 10 jails, which have a total capacity of nearly 17,000 people, which is more folks than if you doubled the population of my hometown when I was growing up. It's been referred to as the world's largest penal colony. So fun fact, back in 1884, in order to prepare for the facility's construction, a foundation of garbage, landfill, and street dirt was dumped on the island to expand the grounds. And even after Rikers officially opened in 1932, landfill continued to be added to the property until 1943. So because it was built on top of a landfill, it leaks methane as the waste below decomposes over time. Workers and detainees complain about mysterious smoke plumes and the strong chemical odor that engulfs the site, especially during the summer. To add to mounting issues with the air quality, 5 power plants are also situated less than a mile away from Rikers in Queens, and some correction officers even believe the toxic chemicals may be carcinogenic and filed suit in 2011. Now, due to its unstable foundation, Rikers is especially prone to sinking and shifting. As air pockets rise up from underneath the site, the ground can resettle to fill in the gaps. Now, this contributes to the crumbling infrastructure of the facility, making it vulnerable to flooding and other natural disasters. As the ground shifts, water pipes located underground can also crack or move. And in addition, the deteriorating of the building themselves have created a fertile ground for the creation of DIY weapons inside the jail. Number 7. Tadmor Prison. So for decades, the mere mention of this prison was enough to send chills down anyone's spine. The notorious facility in the desert of central Syria was where thousands of folks were reported to have been physically harmed, humiliated, and systematically tormented for opposing the Assad family's rule. Now, sprawling prison was located a few miles east of Palmyra, a desert oasis famous for its Roman-era colonnades, temples, and artifacts. Located about 250 kilometers northeast of Damascus, this prison is part of a walled-off military complex that includes military and civilian units as well as an airbase. Former prisoners say it could hold up to 7,000 inmates. It's not the biggest place I've talked about today, but still rather large in size. The most well-known incident in its history came in June of 1980, a day after members of the Muslim Brotherhood staged a failed assassination attempt against, well, somebody in the Assad family. In retaliation, troops belonging to, well, that person's brother reportedly entered the prison and, kaboomed up to 1,000 prisoners who belonged to the Brotherhood. Make of that what you will, there's certain words I can't say. Afterwards, the government took bulldozers from Palmyra to dig mass graves in the nearby Oimer mountain just north of the town. One former prisoner, Abu Den, remembers that when he first entered the prison, he had to walk blindfolded and handcuffed between 2 rows of men who kicked, pushed, and hit him with clubs and metal rods. Now his nose was broken and he bled profusely. He still bears the marks on both his legs, as well as his permanently dislocated right arm. He recalls the warden telling a gathering of detainees shortly after they arrived, "You have come to your end. There is no mercy here. God is prohibited from entering the jail. We are God and decide if you live or die." He was regularly physically tormented and humiliated during the 4 years and 8 months he spent there, and the jailers never referred to him with his real name, calling him number 13 instead. He was actually held in a cell with about 150 inmates and they all shared one bathroom. Like, how disgusting is that? Number 6. Black Dolphin Prison in Russia. Now, this is located near Russia's border with Kazakhstan and is reserved for the country's most dangerous and violent convicted criminals, including serial killers, people eaters, more heinous things I can't say. It is named for the dolphin sculpture created by the inmates that sits on the grass at the front of the prison reception. Now, prisoners are watched 24 hours a day via video surveillance, and guards make rounds every 15 minutes. 2 inmates are assigned to each 50 square foot cell that is behind 3 sets of steel doors to keep it, extra isolated from guards and other inmates. They're allowed outside for only 90 minutes a day in the barren concrete exercise yard, and if they're moved anywhere within the facility, they're cuffed, blindfolded, and forced to walk bent over so they can't learn the prison's layout, interact with other prisoners, or overpower the guards. Number 5. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison. Now, Kenya is notorious for tough conditions in its prisons, and this one, located in Roysambu constituency, is widely regarded as, the worst. It was built in 1954 by the British and modeled after an old-style colonial system to house offenders during a state of emergency declared in October of 1952. It still has its original gallows, by the way, even though apparently the last execution there was in 1987. It is notoriously overcrowded and the conditions are unsanitary. The prison's official capacity is 1,200, although reports suggest that there are between 1,800 and 2,500 inmates crammed inside. Serious health conditions, including HIV, AIDS, gonorrhea, syphilis, tuberculosis, and dysentery are rampant. Now, although this prison was already well known for housing political prisoners and, executions, its infamy grew in 2008 when a riot sparked by a contraband search was captured on cell phone and showed on television. It also made headlines again in 2021 when 3 convicted terror suspects escaped. To my knowledge, they still haven't found them. Number 4. Mendoza Prison. With a population roughly 3 times its capacity, this prison in Argentina is severely overcrowded. As many as 5 inmates are crowded into cells that measure only 43 square feet, and many inmates are forced to sleep on the floor without mattresses. Amnesty International reported on the conditions back in 2005, alerting that the people imprisoned in Mendoza are in such a desperate situation that they have gone as far as to sew their mouths up in demand of better living conditions. The conditions at the time were so dire, they included tormenting and in some cases even death to inmates. Prisoners had inadequate medical care and the prison lacked a proper sewage system, forcing inmates no other choice but to use plastic bags and bottles as their washrooms. That's awful. So inhumane. Number 3. Gitarama Prison. Well, this might be the most crowded prison in the world. It is home to more than 7,000 prisoners in a facility that was meant to only hold 400. Not 1,000, was meant to hold 400. Given the, extreme overcrowding, the folks that are housed here are forced to stand barefoot on the filthy ground for all hours of the day, causing their feet to rot. Many eventually require amputations, but with only one full-time doctor dedicated to the prison, most prisoners are unable to receive the treatment that they need, resulting in half a dozen deaths each day. That's too many. Number 2, San Quentin. The oldest prison in California, this one is notoriously known for its violence. It's been home to many infamous criminals, including, Charles Manson and Scott Peterson. It had the only death row facility in the state for more than 700 death row inmates, and it was home to California's only gas chamber. But in early 2022, the state started the process of closing death row and relocating the inmates, 3 years after the California governor ended executions in the state. Over the years, and particularly in the 60s and 70s, this prison had a reputation for corruption and riots that were encouraged by the guards. Number 1, Bang Kwang Central Prison. So this is a men's prison in the Nonthaburi province of Thailand on the Chao Phraya River, about 11 kilometers north of Bangkok. This is the site of the men's death row and the execution chamber of Thailand, and as of 2018, they had about 6,000 inmates. All prisoners are required to wear leg irons for the first 3 months of their sentences, and specifically death row inmates were required to have their leg irons permanently welded on. Even if you're sick, you still have to be shackled, and often to another inmate. Allegedly, the inmates are forced to live in cramped cells with no mattresses or toilet facilities, and when in their cells, they only have 1 square meter of space instead of, 4 to 6 meters as recommended by the Council of Europe. Prison meals consist of unidentified vegetables and rotting meat, so enjoy having your stomach turn at the thought. Believe it or not, crime victims in Thailand are also often treated as criminals. For example, a Brit was charged for defending himself after he'd been attacked by a group of folks. Although the man suffered serious injuries and had his eyeball replaced, he was actually charged with fighting back. Speaking of fighting, many prisoners, including tourists, are forced to fight for their freedom, which is a practice that dates back to the 18th century. Yeah, no thank you, I'll just sit there in the corner and wait. And that brings us to the end of our time, and if that's not a good list of why to never commit a crime, I don't know what is. If you enjoyed my chitter chatter today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more disgusting content, and I'll see y'all next time I buzz in over here at Bumblebee.